Hello, everyone. I'm sorry for the multiple delays for this stream. For those who are watching it after the fact, I'm sorry. I literally forgot that there was a stream today, and I did not want to delay it again because I didn't want to miss out on the Turtles' birth month. Now, some may say, oh, but Star Wars is like birth month is May. No, Star Wars' birth month is in December because Star Wars, the first published Star Wars media was the novelization. So it's not the same thing. The Turtles, May is their birth month. So you don't get to argue with me, Star Wars fans, on this one. No, 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 no. Star Wars was not born in May. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was. Now, why is this month so significant for the Turtles? Well, obviously, for those of you who have been living under a rock, like it started off as a comic book. It didn't start off as a cartoon. Of course, this is common knowledge for any fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It isn't unknown that this was a comic book first. But it was hard to find any issues of the old comics back in the day, unless you were fortunate to have bought them when they came out. Because unlike other comics where trades would eventually come out, you didn't see very many reprints of the old comics until IDW owned um, the comic rights to the Teenage Ninja Turtles. Issue one is an issue like I'm pretty sure a lot of people know because it's arguably the most reprinted issue of the entire franchise, and not to mention anyone that does a quick Google search will know it is the most iconic issue, along with issue 4. For those who've played the original NES game, will be familiar with that cover. And those who've actually watched the 2003 TMNT series in the early 2000s will also be familiar with the various storylines that the comics pulled from. Now, I'm not going to be talking about more than 8 issues, though I said 7 in the description. There is 8 issues in the current trade that I'm holding in my hand. Well, you can't see it. I guess it's better that I actually just show it on camera. Yeah, the camera's going to ship at this trade here. This is basically what I'm talking about, which collects the first 8 issues. Now, these stories in particular that I'm discussing are the ones that were written by Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman. They also were drawn by them as well. So these are the OG Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics. This is back when the TMNT were an underground comic, before there was a cartoon. And for those of you who are not as familiar with this era of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a lot of the influence from old DC comics and Marvel could be seen in these early issues. Now, my recommendation for reading these comics is to read them in the original way that they were published. Now, for those of you who don't have as much money to buy the edition that I have, which is the Ultimate Collection, I would go to a site that basically you could read all the comics there. Yeah, I do endorse piracy. What are you going to do about it? Because some of these trades are out of print now, unfortunately. When it comes to classic TMNT comics, I'm talking about the Mirage era, it is very hard to find these comics now for a good chunk of them. Like some of them I regret not purchasing when I had the chance. Now, I have yet to discuss the significance of the first issue. Now, this is probably the issue I've probably talked about 3 separate times. The first time I talked about it, I talked about I forget, I don't even remember the year. I do know I tried to do what I did with Star Wars. The second time I talked about it, I talked about it again, but this time I was doing this for the sake of the stream because I want to know how people are going to react to me reviewing comics in stream form. Though, since this is a special kind of stream, this is basically the 40th anniversary of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. 40 fucking years since this franchise has graced this world. It's fucking ridiculous. Most of us weren't even born when the first comic was published. I'm going by those who are watching me and myself. Like, I was not even born when the first issue came out. And I'm not just going to talk about the comics, though it will be a huge topic of discussion. So how does the first issue hold up? Let's just talk about the issues in order. Now, the artwork, you can look it up yourself because I don't really want to hold this while I'm holding my mic at the same time because that's not how I want to do it. And not to mention the cameras and shit quality. You're not going to really see the how good the art is in the image. Now, when the first issue was published, for those who don't know, this was not intended to be a comic that was going to run multiple issues. It was going to be originally a one and done deal. And if you look at the comic from the first issue, you can look this up yourself. There's a lot of references to Frank Miller and Jack Kirby. You could really tell, especially if you know comic books. It's not required to appreciate these issues, at least the first one, but you could literally see the backstory with Daredevil. If you're familiar with Daredevil as a character in his comics, there's a lot of references. Like Splinter's name, Stick, the Foot Clan, the Hand. Like, this is not the friendly Turtles that you know, where, if you're familiar with the 87 incarnation, where they're friendly and pizza-loving turtles. No, they're fucking assassins. They mean business. They will fucking kill you. And unlike the other incarnations of the Turtles, they're not really you would consider a good guy in the sense that you would see in later iterations, because the concept of the Turtles wasn't supposed to be written that way. And this incarnation, which of course you don't see this in issue 1 because, again, the first issue is basically it's supposed to be a one and done, or done deal, gives you the backstory behind the Turtles' origin, Shredder, Splinter. And I think it does it in a way where it doesn't waste time. It informs the reader what this story is all about. And I think on its own, I do think it tells us a good story. Now, from the artwork perspective, I think the art is pretty fucking amazing. It may not be to everyone's taste. Not everyone is going to like the first issues, like the way the panels look, but I do think you could tell a lot of heart went into this issue with Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman. Like, they really went all out. It is literally a satire of Daredevil with some homage of Jack Kirby. And you may be familiar with some of the panels that some of the movies or the TV shows have paid a homage to. Issue 1 is probably the most adapted issue of the entire franchise. I mean, it's kind of hard not to adapt issue 1, at least certain aspects of it. And of course, by the end of it, the Shredder basically dies. Yeah, you heard it here. For those of you who are not familiar with the original iteration of the Turtles, who are only familiar with the cartoons and the IDW continuity, in the original comic book, Shredder is straight up killed. because Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman were not fans of recurring characters coming back constantly. Because, in comic books, we all know this. It's kind of a joke at this point. When a hero or a villain gets killed off, they get brought back eventually. And they didn't want to do that for their comic. They wanted it to be different. And you could really tell when this issue was published that they weren't trying to be like the mainstream comics of the day. They were trying to be their own thing. They published their issue themselves. Like, it's the backstory behind how the Turtles were created is very interesting. It really is. I'm not going to tell you everything, every single detail, because we'll be here all day. But Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman, one of the things they did do to finance their comic is a tax return that they had that year. I'm not 100% sure if it's Peter Laird or Kevin Eastman or both of them, but they did use their tax return in order to finance this comic. And not knowing if this comic would be successful, they put all their heart and soul into it. You could really tell by this comic. And by the end of it, it left an impact on people. People wanted more. People were interested. It's like they wanted to see more of this world because there wasn't really any comics like it at the time. There wasn't. It was dark. It wasn't for kids. Like people, of course, today, the TMNT is associated as a property for children, but that was not how it was when it was first published. Now, as much as I've been praising issue 1, I guess if there's some criticism I could give to the issue, it's more hindsight than anything else, because as a standalone comic, I think it works really well. The Turtles themselves aren't really characters in their first appearance. And it's really hard to tell the Turtles apart in terms of personality because, again, this was not intended to be more than one issue when it was first published. Of course, this is a reoccurring thing in the first few issues as a whole. Because the people are just are trying to figure the Turtles out as they write it. And you'll notice that when you read the first issue, if you haven't read it. I've read this issue probably more than any other issue of the franchise. I think it's one of those stories that I recommend any TMNT fan to read. I think it's a good place to start if you're looking to read comic books. Now, the character of Oroku Nage, which is an obscure character from many fans, he has been merged to Oroku Saki in pretty much many incarnations since the first issue was published. Like, if you're familiar with the first Ninja Turtles movie, man, I'm nerding out here just talking about it, but Oroku Nage's story was merged with Oroku Saki because Oroku Nage is basically not really a character. He's just there to serve the backstory for the Turtles and how the Hamato clan and the Foot clan had a feud. And I do think actually it was for the best that they didn't use Oroku Nage in later version and it just merged the two characters into one, because they were basically, there wasn't really any reason to have Shredder go for his revenge against the Turtles and Splinter, well, Hamato Yoshi more than anything else, when there isn't much to go on for Oroku Nage. So just merging the two characters was actually a good call. Now, what's really interesting at the time is Japanese culture wasn't really that well known. So I bring this up because when Shredder was introduced, who's known as Oroku Saki, Americans did not know how Japanese people introduce themselves or how their names are arranged. Of course, as someone that's been exposed to Japanese media for like the past 20 years, I could well, those of you who are in my audience will know this as well. They announce themselves by their last name first, and then their first name. And there was a lot of confusion for years with the character of Oroku Saki, because they got the names mixed up, where it was Saki that was like the first name, and Shredder was not Shredder. Oroku was the last name. Sorry, Oroku was the first name, and Saki was the last name. And of course, they fucked this up in multiple times throughout the 1990s. It wasn't until like season 7 where they finally corrected it, because most people do not actually understand this like at the time, and because Japanese media, there was a limited exposure to it. And another thing that was really interesting, the process of them, with the reason they chose the names, like, this is why I'm saying if you could read the Ultimate collection, I would recommend reading this version, because at the end of each of these issues, by the way, I'm going by the Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman issues, you actually get additional insight on how they put certain panels together, and even the origin for some of the the names, like the turtles themselves. Like, they they didn't want to give them Japanese names because that would be too strange, which is very interesting. Like, they did consider coming up with Japanese names at one point, but dropped it because it'd be too foreign. Though Italian names is pretty foreign as well, but whatever. Oh, another thing. Of course, this is not something that many of you will know. Did you know Michelangelo's name was misspelled in the original comics for a long time? Of course, I don't know if anyone would know this, but if you look at some of the old TMNT merchandise, Michelangelo's name was misspelled, and it was Michelangelo, not Michelangelo. So you had a good amount of time in the franchise where Michelangelo's name was spelled wrong. It's kind of hilarious. Well, they did that primarily because, okay, if you look at the original comics, as much as I love the red headbands for all the turtles, I understand why they gave them different colored headbands, because it was in the comics, it was hard to tell them apart. It wouldn't be until later issues where you knew who the character was based on their personality and what weapon they carried. And of course, not to mention the designs for the turtles gradually changed as the comics progressed. Because if you look at the way the turtles look in the very first issue, and those who watch Turtles Forever, I bring that up because the special of Turtles Forever, when they basically adapted the Mirage Turtles into the 2003 series movie special, they used the original designs for the turtles. And for those of you who read the Mirage comics, if you read the comics, the later issues, they look more like the turtles that we're familiar with than the ones when we first see them. Oh yeah, I would love to talk about Mutant Mayhem. I really would. It was definitely a love letter for any TMNT fan. I loved it. Now, the second issue of this comic is, okay, what is significant about this? Now, I'm not going to repeat myself, and I'm not going to spend as much time on issue 2, primarily because I don't think it has the same impact issue 1 has, because the biggest thing I could say it does have an impact on is the introduction of the Mousers, which becomes a series staple. Baxter Stockman, who is a reoccurring villain in various incarnations, though in the Mirage continuity, he doesn't have that many appearances. So there isn't really much to really go on for Baxter Stockman. In fact, I haven't read that many stories he's featured in, so in the Mirage continuity, there's barely anything on Baxter Stockman. So Yeah. The most significant thing about the second issue, though, is the introduction of April O'Neil, the ally of the Turtles, and the, what's real. What's really weird about these old comics is it is very difficult to tell. Look, this is a nitpick here. So, for those of you who are fans of these comics, please bear with me. It is very difficult to tell who April is. Like, it is very difficult to tell because in the old comics, it's very hard to tell what her ethnicity is. And in issue 2, it was obvious that Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman struggled to draw female characters. And I'm not saying this because she looks masculine. I'm just saying if you just compare how the male characters look, it's hard to tell who she is. They do get better at drawing her after this issue. It's just the basics of who April would become later is established in this issue, but I don't think it stands out as much. Sorry. Now, Baxter Stockman, one thing I find really interesting about this version, though, when he first appears is he's basically a capitalist terrorist that tries to extort money in order to get rich. It's like, yeah, I totally see that. Unfortunately, that aspect of Baxter Stockman's character would not be touched upon until the IDW continuity, which, though the IDW continuity, to be fair, mostly pulls from the amazing 2003 iteration of the character. Of course, this comic would also be the first that would end in a cliffhanger, because there really isn't a resolution in this issue like there is in the first. And of course, you could see the art does improve. Now, I'm not going to overly talk about the art because it's repetitive, but you could really tell that the art improved from issue 1 to issue 2. Because unlike Marvel and DC Comics, Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman weren't working with deadlines. They can when they want to make these issues. And you could really tell these people had a blast drawing this. Like, I can understand why so many people enjoyed this back then. I could it'd be amazing if I were someone who was like a young adult back when this comic was first released, because there really wasn't anything like it. And of course, for those who've watched the 2003 series, will be familiar with its story. And I find that really crazy. How the hell do you adapt 2 episodes? So use 2 episodes to adapt a single issue. Of course, issue 3 is not an issue that was adapted. Really, they did take parts of the issue. No, they can't. In fact, I've heard some instances where she was based off Kevin Eastman's then girlfriend at the time. Some says she was Latino, some says she was black. You get to, in the second issue, there's a panel where April, it's hard to tell if she looks like a ginger, but it's hard to tell because it's in black and white. And I don't count the colored versions as the official hair color for April, because in the comics her hair is black. That's her official hair color in the comics. And then you have another panel which is okay, forgive me for nitpicking this shit, because come on. Then you have one panel where she looks like a Mexican woman, and then you have another panel where she looks like an Asian woman too. This shit is insane. That the second issue, I forgot how crazy these comics were. Like, majority of the second issue is a literal chase scene. Of course, this is the issue that introduces the Utroms. Like, I'm not gonna lie, they crammed a lot of stuff in the second issue. They literally were hoping to build more on the on these comics. Like, shit. I'm just okay. Oh, of course, for those of you who, okay, before I continue, because I don't want to like get sidetracked here, so let's just address some comments if people have any. Hey, what's up? Yeah, like I feel old. Like I'm 30. It's like I'm 30. Jesus, oh, what the fuck is wrong with me? I'm forgetting my own age. I'm like 36 or am I 35? What the? Okay, sorry. Okay, that's just fucking ridiculous. Come on, what the fuck is wrong with me? Seriously, what the fuck is wrong with me? Okay, hold on. Yeah, I was born in 88, and it's fuck it. I'm 36. I don't fucking care. What difference does it make? But still, I was born in 88, and this comic started in 84. This franchise. It's like, yeah, holy shit, you're 21. Fuck. Yeah, 36. Yeah, I was right. I will be 37 in a few weeks. Oh, fuck. Whatever. No sense of. Well, I can tell you some stories that will. Yeah, anyway. '59. I thought you were in your 40s, Stan. I really did. Wow. I really thought you were in your 40s. Yeah. Now, for those of you who probably read more comics than I have, will be familiar with this. Now, I'm not only going to talk about micro issue Raphael because the others are not relevant to this discussion. This was the first issue that truly explored the turtles in depth, and the first among them was Raphael. Now, for those of you who don't know, Eastman's favorite turtle is Raphael. And obviously, that's my favorite turtle because I have him as my avatar for this video. Because if I'm going to talk about Ninja Turtles, I'm using my favorite turtle. Peter Laird's favorite turtle is Donatello. I figure for those of you who don't know, it'd be something of interest. Also, since this issue introduces a fan favorite character and Kevin Eastman's second favorite character as well, Casey Jones is Eastman's second favorite character. Now, this issue starts off with Raphael and Michelangelo sparring, and Michelangelo basically kicks his ass and basically just fucks with him, and Raphael gets so angry that he almost kills Michelangelo. And with this issue has deals with a parallel character called Casey Jones who has his own anger issues, though the Mirage version of Casey is an interesting character. He really is, though. I'm gonna address some. I'm actually gonna save some comments. So for those of you, because I feel like I must address some. Now, the first TMNT movie, you guys are knowing where I'm getting at if you've seen it. there's a lot pulled from this issue. Like some lines, the way the fight scenes are choreographed. Like, of course, this issue, you could really tell this is Eastman style. You could like, of course, I don't want to repeat myself, but I'm just geeking out to seeing some of the panels that the first movie adapted. And of course, unlike the other incarnations of this story that would, because each of them do, like the 2003 series does its own take on this issue, and the 90s movie does its own take on it as well, because you don't see Raphael and Casey really bury the hatchet in the 90s movie. Understandable, because there's barely any time, because in the 90s film, for those of you who hasn't seen it, it's Donatello and Casey that basically are that they're closely, they're basically bond in the movie. When anybody that knows TMNT comics or TMNT lore as a whole, it's Raphael and Casey that are usually brothers. So the first issue introduces Casey. Raphael finds a parallel between himself and Casey, and by the end of the issue, he learns to control his anger better. Now, another thing about this version of the Turtles that isn't present in other incarnations, sadly, is Raphael and Michelangelo are actually very close in the original comics. Like, Michelangelo is basically the brother Raphael is the closest to in the original continuity. You don't see that in the other incarnation. It's usually Leonardo. And I just find I can't help but point that out, because I figured I'd just point out some details that most people do not know. Yeah. This is one thing I will say this. We do have to thank the likes of Jack Kirby and Frank Miller, because without them, we would never have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ourselves. But Jack Kirby, you would not have the TMNT comics that we know. That's true. I personally prefer Splinter, how he's portrayed in other incarnations, but I don't take of the character, because the thing that people got to understand about the original, if you really think about it, it always ends in tragedy because it's a never-ending cycle. Like, Shredder, it was Orokusaki wanted revenge for the death of his brother. The Turtles kills Orokusaki. Foot Mystics brings back Orokusaki, which I'll explain and detail more if you guys want me to discuss the Return to New York arc in the comics, which causes April to lose her father's store, basically forcing to flee New York, and eventually a war that basically tears New York apart in the final arc of basically Mirage Volume 1. Like, every time the cycle of vengeance happens in the Mirage universe, it always ends badly for someone. And I think the Mirage universe, it's not really about good and evil, really. Because the Turtles are just people. And you can see that time and time again. And I do think that's what makes this universe stand out. Like the Utrums, like the Utrums in general, they're not really benevolent beings like they are portrayed in the 2003 incarnation of the Turtles or the 2012 version. Like they do some very underhanded stuff. Yes, I do. I actually do prefer the Turtles calling Splinter father or dad over master. But I understand why they did that back then. He's basically the grandfather. Same thing with Jack Kirby. Now that I'm actually want to see, I want to get my own take on Dino Man's, like each turtle representing a respective Sailor Senshi. Sailor Mars equals Raphael. That heavily depends on the incarnation of Sailor Mars, because the 90s anime version of Sailor Mars is nothing like, it doesn't have the anger issues that her counterpart in the original anime has. I feel like it varies. I don't know about that. I personally think it would be Leonardo would be more would she would be more like Leonardo if we're going by how she's portrayed in the manga than Raphael. I think that's just my opinion. As a Sailor Mars fan, I personally think she's more like Leonardo if we're going by the original version. The 90s version of Sailor Mars, based on the original anime, yeah, she definitely would be more like Raphael. Sailor Jupiter, I think, would be more like Raphael, no matter which incarnation. Simply because she doesn't have that leader role. I think so. Yeah, not that I have an issue if that's how you see them, but I don't agree. I don't agree with that. Again, okay. Venus and Michelangelo definitely could see that, considering those two would definitely jibe together. Yeah, could see that too. They're both geniuses. They're both nerds. I can see them both coming up with some weird ways they could make a new device, whatever out of whatever kind of junked on it to looking fine. I think Sailor Mercury could do that too. Yeah, let's see. I had to like address those before I get to the next comic issue. So let's see. By the way, I'm looking at the issues as I'm talking about them, so I have a frame of reference. Now, issue 4, for those of you who played the original NES game and you saw the cover from that game, will be familiar with that issue, because that's a lot of people, probably some people's first exposure to the Team NT comics. They see 4 turtles with red headbands, like it's like, huh, what the hell does this have to do with the Fred Wolf cartoon? Absolutely nothing. Awesome cover for the NES game, nothing to do with the actual fucking game itself. Yep, they were. Definitely. A crossover with the X-Men and Team NT would be fucking a dream come true, and Daredevil. Never will happen, though. That depends on the version of Sailor Venus you're talking about, but that's true. Of course, I gotta be careful before this diverges into a different topic. But Ray is also. We're going by the manga. I'm going by manga Ray personally. Ray is also is the second in command. So but again, this could be something we could talk about probably a different day. Now, issue 4. Let's get on to the actual story, because I've been delaying long enough. what is the story for this issue? Now, the search for Splinter, obviously, if you've read these comics, but for those who don't know, issue 4 is basically the search for Splinter. And of course, this is actually the start of a multi-issue arc which would not end until issue 7. Now, if you've watched the 2003 series, you'd be familiar with some of the things that this issue like inspired. Like, it's hard not to see the references to this issue in the 2003 two-parter Search for Splinter. It's really hard not to. Of course, unlike that episode, we actually get a really good fight scene with the Foot Clan. The only reason I'm not showing any of this because my camera's shit that I currently have, and I don't want to have people to see like this in shitty quality. You could literally find this yourself easily. Like, it's hard for me not to talk about how much I love the way these panels are drawn, because I'm a sucker for black and white art. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I love manga so much when it comes, because I actually prefer art in black and white, these comic books, than in color. Oh, I have the Cowabunga collection as well. No, I have it on Switch and PS4. Oh yeah, April's design looks different again. Then again, it's no. I'm not gonna even complain about that. You can really tell that they really did like the sci-fi aspect. I don't know if most TMNT fans know this. TMNT is a science fiction franchise. It isn't just like involving ninjas. Even though my favorite stories of the Turtles do involve like the more spiritual aspects, I don't mind the science fiction parts of it as well. Like, you could tell there was a lot of references to various movies in various comic books in this very issue. Like, if you could find these comics, like at least the version on readcomic.com that has the ultimate collection, I recommend reading this version, because there's some information you'll learn from Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman on what the creative process was and what inspired them. Now, some of the references I'm not familiar with, but I don't need to be familiar with them to appreciate what they did in this issue. Of course, I feel like before I tackled to issue 5, 6, and 7, I think I should talk about the thing that I've noticed in issue 4. Of course, this started with Raphael. By issue 4, it's easier to tell the Turtles apart, considering that Michelangelo starts to resemble the character that most fans are, like, pretty much fans as a whole are familiar with, like him joking around with his opponents, and you start to see a distinction between their personalities, because prior to the Raphael micro issue, it was other than Raphael, it was difficult to tell like the Turtles one from the other, because there really wasn't much to really go on. It's not because of the red headbands, it's just these characters were a learning process for both the writers, and they were trying to figure them out as they came along, which the same can be said for other comic books that were published during their early years. And there was a huge gap between issues, not so big where you have to wait 2 or a year or 2 for an issue. For an underground comic, you did have a decent amount of issues published in the amount of time that people had to wait for them. If only I. Now, issue 5. Now, there is a comic book, though it's not included in this collection, that actually explains what the Fugitoid was doing. Which, who's the Fugitoid? The Fugitoid is Professor Honeycutt, for those who are familiar with the 2003 incarnation of the Turtles, because that's what most people who've probably watched me are familiar with that version of the Turtles, and that's how they were probably introduced to Professor Honeycutt. The Fugitoid had his own comic before he appeared in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, for those of you who are wondering, is it required to read Fugitoid before reading issue 5 of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? No, it's not. This issue basically gives his backstory, and it's not required to read the issue. In fact, it was originally intended to be its own comic until that they decided to put him in the TMNT comic. Fuck. Again, more cool panels. I'm just looking through. I hope I'm not boring you guys. I'm just looking through this and just commenting on what I'm seeing. To think that Turtles in Space took this one comic and put it into 2 episodes, because those who've watched the 2003 series would be familiar with the 5-part episode Turtles in Space, that is basically what issue 5 and 6 are basically based off of. So they literally took 5 episodes. Well, sorry, there was basically 2 issues and they put it into 5 episodes. By the 5th part, it didn't really have that much in common with the issue that they were adapting. Not that there's any issues with taking some liberties. Now, those who've watched the episode will be familiar with the Han Solo and Chewbacca reference. Of course, those of you who never watched the 2003 series or are not familiar with it, I don't know why you're watching this channel if you aren't, because it's no secret that I'm a fan of that show, and a lot of my viewers are as well. In one segment of the comic, there's a reference to the Scoundrels Cantina scene. Oh, Scoundrels Cantina. Oh, fuck, sorry. Mixing that bigoted channel. The Mos Eisley Cantina scene in A New Hope. And even have a firefight in there, which is pretty cool. Though, in the episode itself, you have more of a reference to Star Wars than you do in the actual issue, but you could tell that there was a lot of Star Wars references, and there was a lot of love for Star Wars in these issues, because there's so many references to the original Star Wars film in this one issue alone. Of course, the issues that would come after it, there's even more references. Like when you see the Triceraton homeworld, it looks similar to that of the Death Star. Like it literally is like something you would see straight out of Star Wars. It just looks amazing. One of my favorite panels of the entirety of TMNT history. It's so good. Like the very fact they put so much detail into this one panel. You know what? Fuck it. I guess I could show people that was in shit quality. Just look at the amount of, if you could, if I know it's excuse the shit quality, but the amount of detail that's put into this one fucking these panel, this spreadsheet. It's like, holy shit. It's amazing. It's fucking amazing. The amount of detail that those artists put into that one fucking panel. I can't help but talk about it. Like, there was a great love for Star Wars. Yeah, it sucks. If you want to see the panel in question, just type just type issue 5, actually not issue 5, issue 6 of Teenage Ninja Turtles, and if you want to see the panel in a higher resolution, just type it when you're done watching the stream or while you're watching the stream if you can, because I don't think that low resolution did it justice. I do have a better cam, but I just don't want to look for it at the moment. Yeah, sheesh. At the same time, because it's really there really isn't much to point of just talking about them separately. Like, man, this fight scene in the arena is very brutal. I can't help it. Fucking YouTube. Fucking StreamYard. I'm so sorry. Fuck. Yeah. Guess I'll have to repeat some of what I've said. Issue 7 is where this arc that started with issue 4 ends. Now, what I find interesting about this issue, I'm just bringing this up as someone that's watched the 2003 series. You're going to see me bring this up a lot if I ever talk about these comics in the future, more of them, is just how much the homage was paid into this one issue alone. Now, I don't know how the fuck the 2003 series managed to basically stretched this issue into 3 episodes, but whatever. Now, I guess I'm just going to speed this up because, again, there isn't much more I can talk about without repeating myself. Now, I guess since I'm pretty much done with talking about the comic, not completely, but I just got to give my thoughts. By issue 7 of the comic, well, it's more like the 8th issue if we're going being logical, but issue by the end of the 7th issue, you could really tell Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman, they really did understand what the Turtles were, who they were as people, what made them tick, and you started seeing more of them. You started seeing them do more. It's unfortunate at some point, like after this early time with the comics, of course, I might get into that when I talk about like the long delays between issues, because at some point they would get a licensing deal for the toys and for the animated series, which would basically get them away from the comics, so they wouldn't have as much time into drawing issues, which would explain why, for those of you who probably don't know about the comics, I'm not going to really talk about the guest era of the comics, and because I don't, again I don't have most of them. For those of you who don't know, the guest era is essentially different artists and writers who wrote issues of the comic, and they weren't all considered canon. So, of course, it doesn't really matter now because Peter Laird doesn't own the franchise. But the issues that are 100% canon are those that involve Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman. Fuck. Now, no matter what people say about these comics, whatever how you feel about them, I love them. Despite, I think there's better stories of the franchise that exist out there, but my favorite stories will not exist without these comics. I think they hold up pretty well, all things considered. Because in my opinion, I think a lot of early comics that were published do not hold up. I'm not saying this because I have anything against them. I'm just going to be real. I don't think a lot of the early comics that were published for Batman really hold up. I really don't think they do. They're products of their time, and the stories are kind of childish, despite them being dark. And I just don't see any good reason to really read that much classic Batman outside of maybe a few issues, like the first appearance of the Joker, and the first issue of Batman, just to know the origin of the character if you were interested. Other than that, majority of the Batman stories, I'm bringing up Batman primarily, that most people are going to tell you to read are the more modern stories, because that is what people think of when they think of Batman. They don't think of the Golden Age version of the character. Readcomics.com is where you can read everything for TMNT and other comics in general if you want to read the original Mirage comics. But I think the TMNT comics are different. Am I being biased because I'm a fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Maybe I'm being a little biased, but I do think the stories of these hold up better. Because let's be real with ourselves, majority of comic books, when they were published at this time, they were corporate. Like, there really wasn't much comic book companies that really published comic books. There wasn't that much self-publishers that published their own comics at this time. Yeah, it's true. Batman was the Joker was originally going to be like the Shredder was, and just be a one-off character. I wouldn't want to live in that world where the Joker just stayed dead after issue 1. But again, even though various different things would be different in different variations that most of us would be familiar with, let's be real, most of my audience who are watching this, you probably were introduced to a different version of the Turtles. For those of you who are younger, your first introduction was probably either the 2012 series or the 2003 series. For those of you who are older, who are around my age, your first introduction was probably either the 90s movie or the 87 cartoon. And those who are probably even younger in my audience, if you're watching this, your first exposure was probably Rise, or I don't know if there's any kids watching me, but for those of you who are even younger, your first introduction was probably Mutant Mayhem. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter which version of the Turtles is your favorite, which one, what introduced you to the Turtles in the first place. All of us are fans, and yeah, there's various versions of the Turtles that are better than others, and there's various different versions of the Turtles that I like more than others. Yeah, it really did. The Comic Book Authority. It wasn't until the 70s where you had more creative freedom in comic books. And of course, by the 70s, people just said fuck it. But here's the thing that's ironic. A lot of these characters' best stories, Marvel and DC, were in the 70s and the 80s. It wasn't when they were first introduced. It was their later iterations. The Turtles are kind of the same way. Though I do think the Mirage comics are still worth reading, because I think if you like to understand where these stories came from and to read the original continuity, because there are some really amazing stories in the Mirage universe, such as the Return to New York story arc. Yes, the 2003 series has that story adapted, but the original version of that story is so much different from the 2003 series. Like, of course, I don't want to spoil the issue, but let's just say, okay, you guys are familiar with that scene in the 2003 series where Leonardo and the Shredder like have their duel, and sorry, you have Shredder like squeeze Leonardo's katanas, and Leonardo squeezes the sword of Tengu, and they both jump in the air like it's some classic samurai movie. And at the end of the duel, Shredder's head comes off. That's an actual homage to how Shredder died and the end of that arc in the comic. Though, of course, I'm not going to really get it too much into detail about how Shredder came back. Shredder did and didn't come back. It may be confusing, I know. Just give me a second. I mean, the original comics are fucking insane. Some of the ideas. Though Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman did try to keep the comics as grounded in reality as much as possible. Because unlike the other iterations of the Turtles where you would have mutants left and right, Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman kind of wanted as little mutants as possible because they wanted to keep the Turtles unique. And I am not going to acknowledge your presence. Yeah, I might as well address some questions. We're past the point where I'm talking about the comics. The 2003 series is great. It really is. It's an amazing show. Now, everybody knows my age. I'm like 36. I was first introduced through the 90s movie and the 87 cartoon. But when, sorry, when I think of the Turtles, my nostalgia is never towards that version. It's actually towards the 90s film. Hell, the 90s movies in general, I'm nostalgic towards. Hell, I'm more nostalgic towards the 2003 series, despite me being a teenager when that show came out. Because the 2003 series, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, it was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon I've wanted when I was a kid. I never disliked the 87 show as a kid, but to me, it just felt so lame compared to the 2003 series, not 2003 series, the 90s film. It is so lame by comparison. Now, I didn't hate the show. I never have. I didn't. It just, when it came out on DVD, it shattered all my nostalgia glasses. Because there's some episodes of the original cartoon, I might talk about it eventually, that I really did enjoy. I thought that 87 cartoon was great. It was amazing. I'm ashamed to say this. I did thought it was better than the 2003 series until I watched more episodes. Because that's the thing. Sometimes rewatching a show from your childhood or watching more of a show of your childhood, because mind you, there was barely any episodes available on VHS of the 87 cartoon. And a lot of the episodes that were released on VHS were the best episodes of the show. Of course, some of them were awful. Some of the that they released on VHS. Later, Logan mentioned games later. Some of those episodes were terrible. And I was forced to face that reality when I watched them on DVD. In fact, releasing the 87 cartoon was basically, it's hard not to see it as a toy commercial. It's hard not to, like, when you watch the superior cartoons that came after it, it's like, I don't care what anyone says. It is the worst cartoon of the Ninja Turtles. In fact, it's one of the worst incarnations in general. And this is coming from someone that's within the generation that watched it. The show was, a lot of it was just a toy commercial one after another. And a lot of the people who are watching this here, who are watching my stream about the Turtles, their 40th anniversary, you probably don't have nostalgia for that show. Majority of you don't. Because why would you? And when you try to watch the show without nostalgia, you realize just how little the show holds up. Yeah, every version of the Turtles has its issues, and like the 2003 series did go downhill after season 5. There was some questionable things that show did, but enough of that show was still good that I don't think it ruined the overall experience. Because the first 4 seasons was still good. Season 5 may have had its problems, but it was still a good show when that season aired. It just, when you got to season 6, the dip in quality is so noticeable. It's hard not to like look at it's like, I had nostalgia for season 6 of the 2003 series, and when I watched it recently, those episodes were just fucking awful. The stories were just terrible. It's like, what happened to the dark and serious stories that we had? What happened to like the character development that we got in the previous like season? It's just, the show just goes downhill up until that point. Back to the Sewer was better, but again, that season was so short. I'm not saying Fast and Forward didn't have its moments, but again, I'm saying this as someone that loves the 2003 series. There's some issue with it. Hell, the 2012 series, I love that show too. But one of my biggest criticisms of that show is I really despise how the show pushes shipping. Now, I don't have problems with ships, by the way, for those who like doing that. If you like to ship a character with somebody else, that's fine. I mean, the Avatar fandom is known for doing this. By the way, it's on Nickelodeon. But when you do it to TMNT, it just got ridiculous. You had entire characters ruined as a result of a ship. Like, Casey Jones, one of my favorite characters of the Teenage Ninja Turtles, was ruined in the 2012 series because of the Donatello and April ship. Even Donatello became so obnoxious because of that ship. He became a literal simp. Okay, I'm no stranger to shipping culture. I know about it. I've read fan fiction. In fact, I still do from time to time. But the very fact is, you had the ship kind of ruin certain characters. Is one thing. It's just big criticism I do have the 2012 series. It has a lot of great moments. Don't get me wrong, but the shoving certain ships down everyone's throats does kind of bring the show down. Like okay. Oh yeah, the show. It's like, oh yeah, let's push Karai and Leonardo. It's like, what the fuck? Aren't they literal step siblings? What the fuck? I know Leonardo and April, not April, April. I'm sorry, this idiot again. Leonardo and Karai was pushed hard in that show, and I'm aware that Leonardo and Karai, it was a popular ship when the 2003 series aired. Donatello and April, there was a lot of people who shipped those as well. I understand that, but you're free to do that at your own time. You could do fan art if you wish. I don't have an issue with that. But when you have the fucking show itself ruin characters as a result, no. Yeah, 2012 Casey was awful. Fucking Christ. I hated what the 2012 series did to my boy Casey. I don't have a problem with him being a teenager. What I have an issue with is when you make the guy to an asshole. But then again, ugh. I have no issues with fan fiction. I don't. But I feel like that's where the realm of shipping should stay. I'm not saying I have a problem with it in canon as long as it's something that's on the side that doesn't get in the way of the stories being told. I mean, for fuck's sake, I watched the Teenage Ninja Turtles for the turtles themselves, for the action. I don't fucking watch it. I don't fucking give a shit which versions of the what the two of the turtles want to fuck. Okay, I'm sorry, no, just fucking no. Of course, I don't even want to talk about the horrors of TMNT fan fiction. I really do not want to talk about the horrors. Believe me. The horrors of TMNT fanfiction. I don't want to ever talk about that. I really don't want to talk about that. Please, let's just say you're better off not knowing, and let's just leave it at that. Like, there's certain things in TMNT fanfiction that can be pretty fucking horrifying. What the hell does this have to do with their 40th anniversary? Everything's TMNT. There is nothing that's off limits. Fan fiction or whatever, my thoughts of various things. It is a shame I never reviewed Mayhem as a film. How was it? Well, I saw the film when it came out in theaters. I thought it was good. In fact, to me, I thought it was the best TMNT movie since the 90s one. I think it had a lot of heart. I know I'm not the demographic that the movie was aimed towards, but to me, that's okay. Some of the jokes and some of the references do go over my head because I'm not Gen No offense to Gen Z in my audience, but there's some of the stuff that you got, the stuff that you say I don't get, so forgive me. But there's some things I did get. This movie did reference like stuff that I never thought I would see referenced in Ninja Turtles. They referenced anime for the first time. Attack on Titan being the one thing that they referenced. Now, I'm not surprised because they're not going to reference Star Wars and a Ninja Turtles movie because of Paramount. Even though that's basically been their bread and butter since the Turtles' inception, but I guess you could say that says a lot about the cultural relevance of Star Wars. Now, how did the Turtles themselves, how did the Heroes in a Half Shell, how did they manage to stick around for 40 years? Because think about it. How many 80s properties have died since the Turtles came out? Hell, some of them even before. How did they outlast so many of them? Because, mind you, this isn't just the 40th anniversary of the Teenage Ninja Turtles. There's also Transformers. There's also Dragon Ball. Fist of the North Star as well. I don't think it came out this year. I think it may have come out in 83. Yeah, they did. They definitely did. Just how do they manage to endure for so many years? Because there was times where the Turtles almost died permanently. Like in the brief period in the 90s where there was no new material being made. No new comics, no new cartoons, no new movies in development. Nothing. Yet they endured. For 40 years, the Heroes in a Half Shell, they survived like through thick and thin. I never thought I would see them still around today. I never thought we would still have we have a new cartoon that's coming out. We have another movie in development. We have another video game that's based off Mutant Mayhem. But I'm just okay. I can't help but say this because I am a lifelong fan. I never thought the Turtles would last this long. And if the Turtles can survive like the dark age of the late 90s, I think they can endure for another 40 years. I just think that the Turtles themselves, the characters, the themes of their stories, I think they resonate with people, and for good reason. I think the reason why you're seeing the slow death of Marvel and DC heroes is the Turtles themselves, they've adapted, they've grew up, they've evolved. While the likes of Spider-Man has regressed. The Turtles are allowed to grow up. They're allowed to form relationships. They're allowed to actually make decisions that have long-lasting consequences. I'm going by the IDW continuity here. New and exciting things are allowed to be done with the Turtles. I don't. Well, the Turtles being in high school. What do I think of that? Is that what is this? What is the potential there? I don't know. I know I'm not the target audience for Mutant Mayhem, but that's okay. I think that's what makes it exciting. Because I don't think the Turtles should cater exclusively to older fans. Simply because, let's be real. If you cater exclusively to older fans, you have no future. That's why I think Star Wars has no future. Because I think Star Wars caters to the old fans way too much. And I think that's the reason why the franchise has been able to adapt and is able to evolve, is it actually adapts with the times. The Turtles, with every new incarnation, it's based around the decade that that incarnation is made. They're not stuck in a certain era. That's the problem with with a lot of comic books, DC and Marvel. The characters are stuck in an infinite limbo. They're not allowed to change. They're not allowed to evolve. Their stories are not simply allowed to end. Yes, there's different versions of the Turtles, but every version of the Turtles, they eventually have an ending. Their stories are eventually over. And yes, various incarnations of the Turtles, there's different aspects of the characters that are going to be explored. There may be one incarnation where, Leonardo may not be the leader. You may explore, okay, what is Leonardo outside being a leader? You know what? I actually think I feel like I should have watched the Rise of TMNT, because that show does actually explore that. What is Leonardo when he's not necessarily the leader? Who is, like Raphael? He has leadership qualities. He shows it. I wouldn't mind seeing that explored more. Or God forbid, what if Michelangelo, since he's actually the most gifted of the Turtles, we saw him in other scenarios, like in The Last Ronin, where Michelangelo, we see his full potential explored. I'm just saying that there's almost an infinite amount of things you can actually do with these characters. You put them in situations, and it still feels fresh, because I feel like the Turtles themselves, I don't feel like they're as limited as a lot of superheroes are. Hell, I would argue you could probably make any one of the three Turtles the leader of the group, if the writer wanted them to, because I feel like the possibility for it to happen is there, without drastically altering who the character is. Of course, that also would affect the whatever incarnation of the Turtles that you have. Like, if you have Michelangelo as the leader of the Turtles, of course, some people may think this is blasphemy saying this. You may have that version of the incarnate of the Turtles being more lighthearted in their take, or Donatello. If you're probably exploring like the technical side of Ninja Turtles, maybe that version of the Turtles is more focused on sci-fi than anything else. Like, the possibilities are endless. And I do think they will endure long after I'm basically 6 feet under, because I think they do have that staying power. I think they have the staying power that most franchises don't have. Transformers is the same way, though. Why have I not dedicated to Transformers? Well, it's quite simple. I think I'll answer that. Anyone who, if they ask, I'll just answer it now. I love certain versions of the Transformers, but I'm not as big of a Transformers fan as I am a Ninja Turtles fan, because I like certain iterations of the Transformers Prime, Beast Wars, animated, but that's about it. G1 I considered a guilty pleasure. I didn't grow up. I didn't watch G1 until like it came out on DVD in the early 2000s. So I feel like I would not be doing the Transformers franchise any service if I talked about it, because I'm simply not as big of a fan of that as I am of the Teenage Ninja Turtles. Would I ever do Star Wars? God forbid, if it reached its 50th anniversary. I don't know personally, because I know I'm someone may ask that. Would I do Star Wars? Because other than Teenage Ninja Turtles, Star Wars is one of the things I really love, and I've been a lifelong fan of both of them. So, could I really talk about Star Wars' 50th anniversary? That heavily depends on what my state of mind is in 2027. I'm not going to promise I'll talk about Star Wars on its 50th anniversary. I'm not going to promise you anything because that would be make me a liar. But if Star Wars, if I'm not feeling like I am today about it, I might celebrate the 50th anniversary of Star Wars. I might. If I'm not feeling what I am feeling now. But the Teenage Ninja Turtles, I feel like they deserve to have a stream dedicated to them because it's not every day a franchise reaches 40 and has endured for as long as it has. Not to mention the Teenage Ninja Turtles themselves, they've been pretty consistent with the quality of the comics, the shows, the movies may have been a hit and miss. I'm not going to lie. The first movie is basically, in my opinion, despite the movie being 35 years old, or no, it's 34 actually is more accurate to say. I hold that movie as the gold standard for the Teenage Ninja Turtles. I do not consider any movie as good as that one. I just think there hasn't been, and I don't expect it. I think expecting a movie to be as good as the original TMNT movie is basically expecting disappointment. So I'm never going to hold them to that standard. But I still consider there are other movies besides that one that I like. But I'm just going to talk about them in release order. The second movie, Secret of the Ooze. It's a guilty pleasure. I don't think it's a good movie, honestly. I think soccer moms completely dumbed that movie down. The studio just had cold feet. I just feel like some of the ideas they had for Ninja Turtles 2 had potential, but they weren't allowed to be expanded upon. And not to mention budget reasons for why there's certain things that could not have been done in that film. Ninja Turtles 3, though, that movie doesn't need to be I'm just gonna say this. That movie is a guilty pleasure. I love the third Ninja Turtles movie. Yes, the movie is bad. It's probably possibly one of the worst movies of all time. Like, it has some of the worst acting ever. The dialogue is complete dog shit. The movie has some scenes that are not even supposed to be funny, but are somehow funny. Like this, Casey Jones' scene in the entire movie are probably the highlight of the film. Like the out of place jokes is like, what the fuck? What the hell? Why are they in ancient Japan? Why are they making reference to the Addams family? It's like, what? It's like, can you imagine some Japanese guy is like, what the fuck is the Addams family? What are they talking about? What is this? It's like, yeah, not to mention those awful costumes. I mean, okay, I'm just gonna tell you, I love the third movie, and I know it's fucking bad. And I think this is one thing that people need to fucking. I guess I could say this for those Star Wars fans as well. You could enjoy things that are awful, okay? You don't have. Not everything you love has to be a masterpiece. Stop being ashamed of liking bad movies. You don't have to be ashamed. Be proud. Enjoy it. That is so bad. Yeah, I actually have nostalgia for those three movies. I know the third film isn't good, but I love it anyway. And I'm not ashamed to say I love the third movie. I know it's bad. I know it's fucking bad. But why do I have to freaking like? I'm not going to defend my reason for liking. I like it because it's bad. Then you have the movie, the 2007 movie. I do think that movie. I don't necessarily hate it. I think there was a lot of heart put into it. I think Peter Laird was really trying to do something with this film. and was trying to actually build a new cinematic universe with it, but it failed. My biggest problem with the CGI film, at least the first CGI film, because Mayhem is technically CGI. I personally think like it was basically Leonardo or Raphael the movie. I feel like if you're a fan of Michelangelo or Donatello, like you're kind of shit out of luck. It's like I just don't like the way the characters were characterized. And Leonardo is a dickhead in the third, so not this third movie, the fourth movie. Not to mention the plot wasn't really that good. I mean, visually, it holds up well. Visually, it looks amazing. Visually, like it has a great looking aesthetic. The atmosphere looks really awesome. I think the score is pretty good. The fight scenes are well animated. And I actually saw that one in the theater, by the way. I do wish the movie did have a sequel because I do feel like there was a lot of potential that never unfortunately got realized. Like when the movie came out, like the 2003 series was losing it like popularity. All of its steam that it built from the first few seasons was basically it was losing it. It didn't have the same impact that the first film had. And unfortunately, a lot of the amazing ideas that were set up for the movie were canceled. Like if you like the TMNT has some of the most fascinating history of unmade films. Like the fourth live action film that was never made. There's an interesting history behind the development of it. Oh yes, that fight scene is so good. It's the highlight of the film. Like there was an idea for a City at War movie, like the Return of the Shredder. Of course, I'm just summarizing what I remember, but there's a lot of behind the scenes information you can look up that, wow, this would have been good if only it had happened. Oh boy. Then we have the movies that I fucking absolutely despise. I absolutely despise these movies. And I think you know what I'm talking about. Of course, before I get to that, let's talk about Turtles Forever. The series finale of the 2003 series. Unfortunately, I have a review of it, but I'm probably just going to just do a live stream of my thoughts on the 2003 series. Everyone knows I love that show, but I didn't talk about in depth how much I love that show. Turtles Forever, I thought, was a great love letter to the first 25 years of the franchise. Because when it was released in 2009, it was the 25th anniversary, and out of all the anniversaries, the 25th anniversary sucked. As someone that was around that time, the 25th anniversary sucked. The Ubisoft remake of Turtles in Time sucked. Smash Up, not necessarily a bad game, but it really missed the mark on when it came to like fan service for characters, because you literally had the same people who worked on Super Smash Brothers work on a TMNT game. It's like, wow, sounds like a dream come true. Fucked it up. It's not a bad game, and I wouldn't like just write it off because of it. It's just if you had played it back in the day, you would have been you would like you couldn't help but to think about this could have been so much more. Of course, if there's a lot of stuff I could talk about, like Peter Laird being burned out. Then again, I haven't really talked about Peter Laird that much because that's a topic I could discuss for like I'd be discussing for hours, and there's other people that have done it that could do it better than I could. Anyway, sorry, I'll be back. I gotta use the restroom, so I won't be long. All right, sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, there's some things you could criticize Turtles Forever for. It may not have treated the 87 Turtles with the most respect. And I would say that argument is valid to a degree. But as a whole, I think the movie did a really good job of sending off the first 25 years of the franchise. Man, I can't believe it's been 15 years since. Wait, 15 years? No, it has been longer than that. Has it? Sorry. Yeah, it's been 15 years. Viacom has had this franchise for 15 years, and a lot has changed since then. But I feel like I got to cover the thing that I think a lot of you will probably want me to talk about. I did talk about the Michael Bay films in streams. You can easily find them. They're basically a commentary track. Oh boy. The Michael Bay movies are abominations. Disgusting looking movies. if there's if you thought I was pissed off on the fucking Last Jedi, you have not seen nothing. Though you cannot find the videos anymore because I deleted them, but I was pissed with the Michael Bay films. The very fact there was people that defended those abominations. I don't care. Those fucking designs are awful. Those designs are so fucking awful. And not to mention, I argue every single design for the turtles was borderline racist. Like every single one of the turtles looked like some racial stereotype. And it's hard not to notice it. They made my boy Michelangelo look like a pedophile. Raphael look like some sort of like stereotype for, well, I'm not going to say it, but you get what I'm meaning. Raphael was a black stereotype. Leonardo was a Asian stereotype. Mike Donatello was the stereotypical nerd stereotype. Like it's like they only got the superficial differences between the turtles, and that's it. And not to mention the way they looked, which is so. How the fuck can these Hulk looking turtles be ninjas? Like, how the hell can you basically try to hide, to stay in the shadows, or try to be ninja when you're so damn big that fucking anyone can freaking see you from a mile away? Like it's not like freaking the 2003 turtles are tall. That okay, that's fine, but there's a difference. It's a fucking cartoon.
And not to, but they weren't nearly as big as the Michael Bay turtles. They were still reasonable in size, and they were tall. Yeah, sure, that's fine. But what works in a cartoon does not work in live action. Not to mention the turtles are so big. It's like some of them are as big as the Transformers and the Formers movies. There's no way people that large could be ninjas. It just doesn't make any sense. Oh God, fuck those designs. I fucking despise them. Leonardo and was decent, and maybe Raphael's would have been decent. It's just, they're so awful. Of course, the designs is like not what the thing I like freaking hate the most about the movie. It's just the movie barely had anything to do with the turtles. Not to mention, like, if you watched Amazing Spider-Man and the first of the Bayformers Turtles movies, the plot is almost beat for beat the same. It's like, hold on. You're telling me you were so unoriginal, you could not have come up with a more original plot. You literally had to copy from fucking Amazing Spider-Man. By the way, I did like the first Amazing Spider-Man film, but you could not have come up with anything original. The very motivation of the villain is fucking unoriginal. Not to mention, you could literally tell that the movie like reshot some scenes, which completely like it was obvious like the character who was supposed to be the Shredder was going to be the Shredder for the film. Like, not to mention having the Japanese that the Shredder spoke was just so bad. It's like, who the fuck did they take us credit for? What the fuck did they take us for? I feel so insulted. Okay, as someone that's been exposed to a lot of Japanese media at that point when I watched the movie, it's like this doesn't sound like this person is even fluent in Japanese. Like, you have some of the actors who were casted as certain characters, like get it that like Karai was in the movie. Like, I'm talking about the first movie. Karai is a character that's usually depicted as someone who's, at least in her appearances, who's in their early 20s. Yet she looked like she was in her 40s. Okay, I'm not going to blame the actress because it's not her fault, but still, she didn't even act like Karai or feel like Karai. And the fucking Foot Clan were like, what? They looked like freaking like something from like some sort of mercenary gang, because Michael Bay cannot resist his fucking military sexual fetish. I know, I'm sorry, but I think Michael Bay has some sort of like hard on for men in uniform. I think Michael Bay might be in the closet, if you get my meaning. Of course, the second film is even worse than the first film, believe it or not. Yeah, the turtles are featured more, but oh my god, the jokes are even fucking worse. Okay, I don't mind like maybe some crude jokes if it's appropriate, but okay, as a fan of the Teenage Ninja Turtles, I'm just gonna say this: a lot of people that watch it are kids. Why the hell are you making dick jokes in a film that kids are likely gonna watch? I mean, what the fuck is wrong with you? It's like, what the fuck? It's like seriously, what the fuck? It's like I'm just talking about the Bebop and Rocksteady. Yeah, they were the best part of the movie, but really, are you really? This is like juvenile. Like, that's one thing I hate about Michael Bay's films in general. Of course, I'm going by the TMNT. Transformers, I have the same criticism, but I'll just do Ninja Turtles primarily. Is his the juvenile humor of these fucking movies. Oh, this is what teenagers and adults find funny. No, this is childish. This entire this toilet humor is just childish. It's not freaking. You don't just because it's PG-13 doesn't mean you have to have toilet humor. I mean, the TMNT is a property that a lot of it appeals to freaking children. You don't make fucking dick jokes. If you're gonna freaking make, if you're gonna allude to something like that, there's more creative ways you could do it, so the adults could understand what's being said, not to literal fucking kids. Like this is Marvel understands this as much as I like to give Marvel shit for like it's like formulaic formula. At least they understand that a lot of the audience are going to be freaking kids. They're going to freaking watch these movies with their parents. Yeah, if I was a parent, I would not want to fucking watch this movie with my kid because I don't want them to freaking hear dick jokes at such a young age. I mean, come on. I understand that, but just because it's for teens doesn't mean you have to make jokes like that. It's not mature, it's childish. It's very childish. Yeah, and I fucking hated these movies. I hated both of them. For me, I had no hope the Turtles would ever have another chance on the big screen. Which is another reason I hated the Michael Bay movies with a passion. There was no respect towards the source material. The Turtles were treated with no respect. And you could tell the people that worked on it had no respect for the source material. I'd argue they have contempt for or were embarrassed by the source material. Like the story didn't feel like Ninja Turtles at all. Like, yeah, the second film may have had Krang, but again, superficial things. And the unholy crime that the Turtles committed in that film was being friendly with the fucking US government or a government official when every signal fan of TMNT knows the turtles ain't fucking with anyone from the federal government. They ain't fucking with the CIA, and they certainly ain't fucking with the FBI. I'm bringing this up because there is no version of the Turtles outside of Bay's piece of shit fucking duology. The Turtles would ever be friendly with the police or the CIA. Yeah, you might have the Turtles not attack the police. Obviously, they don't want to draw attention to themselves, but they're never going to outright be friendly to them. No version of the Turtles are like that. So yeah, fuck Michael Bay's films, and thank God they fucking have faded from from relevancy from the franchise. And I don't blame the actors in those movies at all. Another thing that pisses me off: they had a good actor for the Shredder, and he's wasted in the second film. He says he's only Shredder for like 1 second, and he just gets completely owned by Krang, and he's basically yeah. Thank God there was not a third film. Thank God. Of course, there was another TMNT movie that I have yet to talk about, like the crossover movie with Batman. Now, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Batman, of course, I basically have criticized the character for being a fascist over the years. I will say this. The movie that adapted the comic of the same name, it adapted the first volume of the Batman and Teenage Ninja Turtles crossover. Personally, I am usually someone that is anal about when the source material is altered in any way because I don't particularly like it when comic books or like it altered. But in this instance, I'm actually glad the movie wasn't faithful to the comic. Because when you compare the Batman versus TMNT, if you've read the original comic, those who've actually read it, I actually think the movie was better than the comic. In every way, I thought the movie was better. We saw more interactions with the Turtles and Batman's rogue gallery. which was a disappointment in the comic. I understand they didn't have that much time to do it, but the very fact was we didn't actually see them interact with Batman's rogue gallery. Not to mention, the Turtles actually had more interactions with the Bat family, even though the other you didn't have like Jason Todd in the movie, or I don't know if Dick Grayson's in the film. It's been a while since I've watched it, but the movie was a tribute to both versions of Batman and the Turtles. Like they had various different references to various incarnations of both. You had a reference to the animated series. You had a reference to the '90s movie. You had a reference to the Killing Joke. Like hell, the ending credits has various references to famous Batman and TMNT issues. Like the movie was essentially a love letter to both Batman and the Teenage Ninja Turtles. You could tell the people that worked on the film were Batman and TMNT fans. It's a shame they never did a sequel because there was so much potential. For those of you who've never read the comic, in the comic, the Turtles get transferred to the DC universe, while the movie, the Turtles and Batman are in the same universe, which I think probably works better because it simplifies everything. Oh yeah, I know. I'm familiar with that. That's interesting. Like the TMNT probably have been in more crossovers than any other incarnation, not any incarnation, any other property. Yeah, the Batman animated film that crossed over TMNT, to me, it is. I actually consider it one of the best TMNT movies, and Batman as well. And not to mention, in this film, neither the Turtles or Batman are treated with disrespect. Both properties are treated respectfully, which you don't get in crossovers very often. And rather do like the stereotypical crossover where they would just take the Joker and just have him be the main baddie for the Turtles. No, it was Ra's al Ghul, which was a perfect choice for him to team up with Batman. Like, it's such a shame we'll not get a follow up. I just wondering, what would a Joker Shredder be like? That sounds like very terrifying. It sounds extremely terrifying. Not to mention the film, we got to see the mutant versions of various versions of Batman's gallery. It's like that's the thing that was disappointing. It's like, how would the Turtles react to the Rogue Gallery? And it's almost as if the writers themselves understood, like fans may have had some criticisms of the comic and actually addressed them. You even had like, yeah, like the Batman just was also toned down in this version, where he wasn't as powerful like he was in the comic. So you did not see him outshine the Turtles like in some points like he did in the comic. Not that I think the comic did that, but it did seem weird that he was able to basically beat the living shit out of Oroku Saki when Oroku Saki is a martial arts master. So both both franchises were treated with respect. Okay, they weren't. I haven't seen that movie in years, so I'm sorry. It's if you haven't seen it yet, for those of you who are fans of Batman or the Teenage Ninja Turtles, I think it's a great love letter to both. As someone that's a fan of Batman the animated series, I thought it was a treat to seeing all the references to it, because I consider that the definitive Batman anyway. Now let's get to the modern TMNT, more modern. I mean, Mutant Mayhem. Now, I think a movie we should thank for Mutant Mayhem's existence, I think, is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Because without that movie, we would not have Mutant Mayhem. Because believe it or not, the budget for this film is actually lower than your average animated film. Yet it doesn't look cheap. And the one thing I will say about it, I love the film. It looks like a comic book movie, and it still looks like. So okay, I'm sorry. I'm doing this late at night. Even though the animation style is not, I don't even know what to describe it. It looks like a comic book brought to the screen. It doesn't look cheap. It has its own style. It looks really crisp and clean. It may be made with a lower budget than something from Pixar and DreamWorks, but I'd argue I prefer the animation style in this, despite being cheaper than anything Disney has made. It just has its own identity. The way the turtles are portrayed in the movie, and I think an added touch of this film, and I think those who are within this age group would probably appreciate it, but I appreciate it as someone as a lifelong fan. The turtles have never been voiced by teenagers up until this point. Up until this point, they've been voiced by adults. And actually have voice actors being the same age the turtles are when the movie is out. I do think it's a nice touch because it makes the turtles actually feel like teenagers. Not that they don't in other incarnations. But I feel like when you have an actual teenager voicing the turtles themselves, because it actually feels like this feels more real. Like these are actually teenagers that actually understand like the kind of culture that they grew up in. So it makes it believable that the turtles would understand all these references to like various different stuff that came out in the 2010s, like Attack on Titan, the reboot Star Trek movies, and whatever other stuff that Gen Z is into. Because these versions of the turtles were raised in Gen Z culture. And yeah, I actually think that was a nice thing as well. The way the movie, like, the plot of the movie in general is the turtles having, like, anxiety as all teenagers do. Not to mention, this is the first time we've seen the TMNT, like, really be on social media and just because they, unlike the other versions of the turtles, we never actually had that addressed about. Because come on, would a teenager really want to be stuck in some shitty fucking place underground where it smells and they're basically living in freaking sewage? The turtles do pop culture references in every iteration. It's like it's it's basically they're part of who they are, but that's not what makes them who they are. And I think it's just a bonus. I may not understand, by the way, no offense to Gen Z. I may not understand everything that you guys talk about or some of your language, but I think that's what made the movie special to me because it's not aimed towards me. It's not aimed to my generation. It's aimed towards the generation that's growing up with TMNT right now and Gen Z because they're the ones that are the ones that will get all these references and likely will appreciate it more than I would. But that doesn't mean I don't appreciate what this movie has done because for the past 30 years, I don't feel like the TMNT, when it comes to the movies, has really given a movie that's really even tops the heart and soul of the first film. Now, I know there's a film I did not mention before anyone mentions the Rise of TMNT movie. I've never seen Rise. So I'm not going to talk about something I've never seen. So just for those who are disappointed I did not talk about it. The humor of this film actually did not feel cringy. I feel like each of the turtles, they all had a chance to shine. Yeah, it may have some moments that may make, okay, this makes me scratch my head, like Leonardo's crush on April. It's like, okay, didn't we already do this with Donatello? Okay, hopefully later this is just basically something that's on the side. It didn't dominate his character, but it's just something that may a little annoyed me a little bit. But a thing about this film too is this isn't the first incarnation where each turtle looks different, because you really do see the people who designed the turtles to make them look distinctly different. Just give me a second. I gotta drink some water. Because in the first few incarnations, the turtles have basically the same kind of body structure. And it wouldn't be until like the 2012 series where you start seeing the designs of the turtles start to differentiate from each other. Not saying you wouldn't see that in IDW. But I feel like, unlike the Michael Bay movie, where the turtles were designed in some of the most stereotypical ways, and those who've watched those god awful fucking Bay movies know what I'm talking about. Each one of the turtles has a design that actually makes sense for their personality. Not to mention, they're all good. Leonardo's design is the most classic looking design of the turtles. He looks like something like a mixture between the 87 turtles design mixed with some other designs from that era. Raphael, just because of his headband, just takes some aspects from the rise of TMNT and the Bayformers turtles. Donatello has his glasses, don't have an issue with it. He wasn't a stereotypical nerd the way he looked like he did in the Bayformers movie. And Michelangelo is just Michelangelo. He's like the smallest of the turtles, which makes sense. Each one of these turtles had very distinct looks, and because of how much technology has evolved since the very first TMNT comic, and not to mention with the franchise evolving as much as it has in the past 40 years, like you have seen the turtles look different distinctly, not just their headbands and their weapons, but by their bodies, shapes, the way that their designs look, their even health, the way the stuff they kind of wear, the way they wear their headband, like they've come a long way. Yeah, they were. Which, ironically, the toys of the '87 cartoon were based off the original designs for the Mirage comics. Well, every Turtles design is based off of them to some degree. It just you notice it in some deviation here and there from whatever versions of the Turtles you see. I feel like Mutant Mayhem, I think, has that perfect match where I feel like various versions of the turtles are referenced in some way in their design, and I think is what makes it stand out. I'm not going to get too deep into the film. I'm just talking about my general thoughts about it. I feel like this movie does have heart, and I would not want the movie to be made really any other way. Yeah, I may not be the target audience for this film, and I think that's one thing I just gotta discuss. I think TMNT will outlive me. And the more incarnations of the turtles that get made, I think the more that it's not going to be aimed towards me. The versions of the turtles that I love will never go away. The 2003 version of the turtles, I think, is the definitive version if we're talking about the cartoons. That's never going to go away. My nostalgia for the 90s film, I'm still going to love that film more than any other. And I'm okay with the Turtles changing with the times. I'm okay with maybe, you know what, there may become a time where I may have to part ways with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I'm okay with that. I don't think that's going to happen because one thing I did that I didn't do with Star Wars, and I'm glad I did this is I stay away from forums from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I stay away from groups related to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I stay away with any sort of form of thing with online discourse. That's how I managed to preserve my love for the Turtles, unlike Star Wars, because I've stayed away for the most part from forums. I've basically been isolated. And I think there's some stuff I can address. Like, okay, let me. There's other things I could address before I get to the conclusion. That Power Rangers episode with Venus. Oh, let's just do Venus. Let's just talk about the next mutation because I feel like that's something that we can talk about. The next mutation, which is, I have to be honest, was awful. It truly was. I would not even consider the next mutation a guilty pleasure. I think the next mutation was truly where the franchise was at its lowest point. I feel like trying to mix Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Power Rangers doesn't work. And the crossover episode, in my opinion, is an abomination. It's not good. I love Power Rangers in space. It's probably the Power Ranger season I have the most nostalgic for. No offense to Mighty Morphin fans of Power Rangers, but my favorite version of the Power Rangers, well, my favorite show will always be in space. I thought it had the best story. I thought it had the best characters. I think the moments in space are some of the most memorable, but it has one of the worst episodes in the franchise's entire history, and that is its crossover with the Teenage Ninja Turtles. Mind you, when I was a kid, I thought about, holy shit, the Turtles are crossing over with Power Rangers. This should be exciting. This should be amazing. This should... Oh, boy. Was I wrong. The version of the Turtles that crossed over with the Power Rangers was the worst version. Not to mention the show itself, which is not good in general. Like, the next mutation, like, was just so bad. It really was. It really was bad. I don't mind them not going with the typical villains of the Teenage Ninja Turtles, but it's just if you look at the designs for the next mutation Turtles, like I'm saying, if you look at the way that the characters designed, like if you just look at various like concept art for them, or you look at the way they look in the toys, they look so much better. Like if they had those designs in animation form instead of a cartoon, instead of having it be live action, those designs would have looked great if they were animated. But in live action, those turtles are just awful. Like the designs are not the problem; it's the fact that the designs would have looked better if they were in animation form rather than live action. Because I've seen those designs, like outside of the live action. You could look them up; they actually look really good. Their designs are not that bad. And of course, like Venus, the character of Venus, I'm pretty sure people are going to wonder, what Darth Sinovia, what do you think of the female turtle? I don't have an issue with Venus personally. I think the problem with Venus in general is the potential for a good character was there,
but the execution was just awful. In my opinion, her entire existence was just, hey, let's let's give the turtles a love interest. Oh, but sir, the turtles are siblings. No, that's no problem. We'll make it so that the turtles are not brothers at all. It's like, what? Okay, it's like, hold on. Okay, I'm sorry, but I don't. If there's gonna be a fifth turtle, she should not be a love interest for the turtles. I'm sorry. She should either be an ally of the turtles or a friend of the turtles. She should simply not be like a character that's suddenly like a love interest of the turtles. Fuck no. Fuck no. I mean, I feel like the fifth turtle concept, and I have yet to read her stories, though a lot of anti-SJWs reacted towards her, is Jenica. Like, she was a character that was introduced in the IDW continuity. She didn't get mutated until like the very end of the last arc of the one of like, I haven't read it since issue 100 because I'm waiting for more like material to be available when I read it. So I cannot comment on Jenica, who's basically who's a fifth turtle in that continuity. I have no issue with the concept of a fifth turtle as long as they're not like a love interest for the turtles or an ally of the turtles. It just, to me, I just, come on, the turtles are the turtles don't need another turtle. If they're gonna have a love interest, why does it have to be another turtle? In general, it's like, yeah, I have no issue with Venus. The character in execution was badly done, but the concept of it wasn't bad at all. Maybe a better writer will take that character and make her into a better character than what the original writers for the Next Mutation like could have done. I know Peter Laird hates Venus, while Kevin Eastman's more open to talk about her. I'm not even joking. You can't even make a joke about Venus in front of Peter Laird because he hates that character with a passion. This is well-known information from any fan of the Ninja Turtles. Venus is a character that Peter Laird completely disowns. He doesn't want anything to do with that character. And I do feel like the Venus does kind of like ruin the dynamic with the brothers. I mean, you have four turtles who are brothers. You have a fifth one in the mix. It kind of changes the dynamic way too fucking much. As an ally or a friend of the turtles, no problem. As a love interest or potential sister of the turtles, fuck no. Well, okay, I have no issue with female turtles. I'm just talking about the Teenage Ninja Turtles, the classics involving the original four turtles. I don't think you should have a fifth one in the mix. I feel like it ruins their dynamic. If you want to have a female turtle, well, I have to read like the Last Ronin too, because I do know there's a new set of turtles in a different continuity. That's basically, if you're wondering what the turtles are, they're basically like a new generation of turtles, and two of them are female, which I don't have an issue with. I'm just saying, with Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael, I just don't want a fifth turtle being added to their group because it just changes the dynamic way too much. They work too well together. Anyway, I think I'm pretty much going to end this stream because I pretty much said everything I had to say. Like, I think the TMNT will outlive all of us. Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael, they've been characters that have went through a lot in the past 40 years. They've existed since the Reagan administration. Just think about that for a second. These characters have existed since the Reagan era. It's a fucking trip to think about. They've existed since Reagan. Let's see, how many presidents has happened since the first issue has been published? Let's see, we've had Reagan, we had Bush Sr., we've had Bill Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Trump, and Genocide Joe. Yeah, they've existed for they've been through 7 presidents. And I think they're going to outlive the United States even. Yeah, I'll even go that far. I think the Turtles will outlive even America because I think the various stories of the Turtles, I think, could be applied everywhere. They're not a series that's going to stay in America. I think they'll continue beyond America. I think if the Turtles can survive 40 years, who's to say they can't survive another 40 years? I mean, how many franchises can you name that started in the 80s? Can you say still has comic books being made, still has cartoons, still has had like 7 movies being released in the theater? How many cartoons can you say that has had 5 animated series? Yeah, 5. Fuck, that's fucking insane. 5. No franchise can even compare to this. Like, other than Transformers, no franchise that started in the 80s has survived as long as the TMNT have. Yeah, Thundercats may have gotten a revival, but that was canceled, and you have the Abomination that's basically the Teen Titans Go equivalent of freaking Thundercats. You've had multiple versions of He-Man that has not gotten that much traction compared to the Teenage Ninja Turtles or Transformers. I think they're here to stay. Anyway, Cowabunga. See you guys next time with another video, and depending on the reaction, I may talk about more TMNT related comic books. Though don't expect them to be as long as this video. This was a special occasion because happy birthday, and here's to another 40 years.